When you're learning how to play the guitar, you're always taught about iconic guitar riffs and guitar licks that you need to know. But often we don't talk about iconic guitar chords. Now, on all of our own guitar journeys, we start out by learning basic chord shapes. And those basic chord shapes give us the tools and the skills we need to go on and learn songs and riffs. But inside of a lot of these classic songs and riffs, there are actually some really interesting chords. And these chords are actually things that can define the sound of a guitar player, the sound of a song, or even the sound of a band. So in this video, we're going to learn 9 iconic guitar chords that you need to know from some really great classic songs. This lesson is brought to you in partnership with musicradar.com. So if you want to read up more about any of the chords that I talk about, there is a link down in the description to the Music Radar website. You can go and hit that link. It'll take you over to their website, and over there you'll find a full write-up on this lesson with all the chord diagrams and some information about each of the chords as well. So go down and hit that link and check that article out. So the chords that we're going to learn in this lesson are not that easy to play. Some of these have some quite big challenges attached to them. Now the reason for that is these are not basic chord shapes. They're not just your standard G major, C major type chords. These are interesting chords that use different extensions. There's some big stretches, there's some strange voicings going on, because really they are things that define the sound of a song or a band or an artist. So they do have to be slightly different to the norm. So these chords can be tricky, but if you're learning any of these chords, take your time, go slowly, and focus on getting all the notes clean before you start throwing them around at speed in the middle of a chord progression. So guitar-wise in this video, I'm going to be using my Shergold Guitars Telstar. This is plugged into the Blackstar Studio 10, which is at the back of my studio there. That's running completely clean with a little bit of reverb on, and that is going via the 2-notes Torpedo Captor X. We don't need any drive for this video because we're just focusing on chords. So the first chord that we're going to check out is the iconic Bond chord from the James Bond soundtrack. So if you've seen any of the Bond movies, you'll no doubt know that iconic theme song. Now that riff was played by iconic session guitar player Vic Flick. Now at the end of this, there's a chord, and this chord, if you've seen any of the films, will no doubt be familiar to you. Now that chord is called an E minor major 9. So minor and major being in the same chord title might make you a little bit confused at first if you don't know the theory behind this chord, but it's not as hard to play as it sounds. So what we're playing is an open low E string. Then we're using all 4 fingers. We're playing the 10th fret on the A string with the little finger, the 9th fret on the D string with the 3rd finger, the 8th fret on the G with the middle finger, and the 7th on the B with the index finger. With your index finger, you also want to slightly rest that on the high E string, just to mute that string. So we've got 10, 9, 8, 7 with the open low E. So what this chord actually is it's an E minor chord, but we've got an add 9 in there, which is this 7th fret on the B string. Instead of playing the minor 3rd that we'd normally play in an E minor chord, we're dropping that to the 7th fret, which is now the add 9. And then this note here on the G that we'd normally play, which is an E note, we're flattening that to a D sharp, which gives us the major 7. The 5th of the chord, which is this note here on the D string, which is a B note, that's still intact. When these 3 are played together, that gives us a B major triad. Then we're adding this G note on the A string, that's the minor 3rd of E. So we've got minor 3rd, 5th, major 7th, add 9. And then we're playing the root as the low E open. So it's a really complex sounding chord, but it's not that hard to play. That, though, is an iconic chord, and it kind of defined the sound of spy movies. The second chord that we're going to learn is a very hotly contested chord. This is the first chord you hear in the Beatles track, A Hard Day's Night. Now, many people have come up with a load of different theories about what this chord actually is, but what it's been narrowed down to is it's an F add 9. Now the original was played on a 12 string. Because it was played on a 12 string and the strings obviously doubled up, there's a lot more harmonic content to the original version of the chord. But if we're playing it on a 6 string, the chord shape would be the same. We just don't get the additional content that you get from the 12 string. But the chord is this. So this chord uses all our fingers and our thumb to play. So what you need to do to play this chord is you need to think about it like a simplified F chord. So when you're learning guitar, you probably learned a simple version of an F major chord. So you play the 3rd fret on the D string with your 3rd finger, the 2nd on the G with your middle finger, and the 1st on the B and E with your index finger, giving you this. But what we're doing is, instead of playing this 1st fret on the high E string, we're using our little finger to add this G note on the high E. That's our add 9. Then we're using our thumb to add the F root note on the 1st fret of the low E string. And also with our thumb, we're muting the A string. So we've got the root, a muted string, an F major triad, and then the add 9 on top. The 3rd chord we're going to check out is also a very hotly debated chord. This appears in the pre-chorus of the Oasis song Don't Look Back in Anger. Now if you look at any transcription of this, you're going to see this chord written out as an E7 with a G sharp in the bass, which you would play like this. But that's pretty hard to play. So what I'm playing there is an E7 chord. I'm using my little finger to add this G sharp in the bass. Now while that is theoretically correct, and that will work inside the song, what Noel Gallagher actually plays is this chord. Now this is still an E7 with a G sharp in the bass. We've got our G sharp right there on the 4th fret of the low E. Then I'm muting the A string with the underside of that finger. I'm playing the open D. The open D also appears in the E7 chord. That's my flat 7. I'm playing the 4th fret on the G, which is a B note. That's the 5th of my chord. Then I'm also playing the open B, which again is a double of the 5th. And then the root again on the top, which is the E. So this is actually the chord Noel plays instead of this. So if we hear the correct version of the chord now in context, we can hear that that fits absolutely perfectly. It has slightly less harmonic information than the E7 chord with the G sharp stretched into the bass, even though it's the same chord, it's just a different voicing of it. Because we're playing it in this sort of lighter voicing where there's less bass content, it actually sounds a little bit more jangly. So when we actually play that against the track, that fits absolutely perfectly. And that's actually been confirmed by Noel as the chord that he plays. 4th chord is another iconic chord. This is known as the Hendrix chord. This is an E7 sharp 9. Now this chord appears all over Hendrix's discography, but probably the most famous use for this is in the riff from Purple Haze. So this chord is an E7 with a sharp 9 added. So instead of playing an E7 like this, like we normally would, this chord is played like this. So I'm playing the 7th on the A string with my middle finger, the 6th on the D string with my index finger, that's my major 3rd there. Then I'm playing the 7th on the G with my 3rd finger, so that's my flat 7. So far we've got root, major 3rd, flat 7, and then playing the 8 on the B string with the little finger, that's my sharp 9. We could also think of this like if we were playing an E9 chord like this, which is a very great funk chord. What we're doing is taking that 9 and sharpening it. But because we've got that flat 7 there, it takes on the voicing of an E7 sharp 9. Now while the root is present here on the 7th fret of the A string, you can also add the low E if you want as well. Hendrix would often do that. He would often hit the open low E and then add the chord on top. That's a great chord. You can have some real fun with that, and it's a great chord to add to your blues rock riffs. The fifth chord we're going to learn is from the Killers track, Mr. Brightside. Now this is just a D9 chord, but we're taking the fifth interval out, so it's a D9 with no 5 in there. Now a D9 chord is a pretty easy chord to play. It's like this. It's a great funk chord. We use that a lot in soul and Motown music. But what makes this one so hard is the workspace that we're playing in. So we're actually playing it like this, all the way up here. So this is just a D add 9 chord, but we've just changed the voicing slightly. So instead of playing the D add 9 chord in the usual formation where we would play the flat 7, we're actually playing a double of the octaves. So the breakdown of this chord, once you've got the shape under your fingers, is that we've got the root here on the A string on the 17th fret. Then we've got the major third on the 16th of the D. Then instead of playing the usual note here on the G, which would be the C note, which is the flat 7 of the D9 chord, we're actually adding this note here on the 19th fret, which is another D note, so we're just doubling the root as an octave. Then we're adding the 9, which is this E note here on the B string. So it's root, third, root, 9. Then we would normally have the 5th, which would be the 17th fret here, which is an A note. That's the 5th of the D chord, but we're actually playing an open E, which is another add 9 note. So we're actually removing the 5th from this chord altogether. So it's root, third, root, 9th, and then a double of the 9th, but an octave lower. So that's a very tricky one. That's been driving guitar players mad for a long time because you're working in a very cramped space there. So with that chord, you do need to put a bit of extra care into your fretting. You really have to make sure you're coming over each one of those strings to get that chord sounding clean. The sixth chord we're going to check out is from the forbidden riff from Stairway to Heaven. Now the chord in question is actually the second chord of the progression. So the progression runs from an A minor to this chord down to a C major chord. Now the chord in question is that middle chord, because there's a lot of debate about what that chord actually is, and there are a bunch of different theories and ideas about what we could consider that chord to be. So in the write-up for this, which is on the Music Radar website, which you can access via the link down below, I've put some of those alternative scenarios and why those are considered to be right or wrong. But what we're going to go with in this video is what is probably the most theoretically correct idea about what this chord actually is. So what that actually is a C augmented major 7 with G sharp in the bass. Now that sounds like a mouthful for 4 notes. And the reason it's considered to be that is because what we're sort of playing here is this chord, which is loosely based on a C major chord, which the C major chord that appears in Stairway to Heaven would be this. So it would be the 5th fret on the D, G, and B strings. That's a C major triad, but then we're adding the C at the top as well. But we're actually playing a G in the bass there, so it's a C with a G in the bass. Now this chord appears after this chord, which appears after this chord, which is the first A minor chord. So the idea is that it walks down. But this chord in the middle is the one that's caused a lot of different arguments and discussions. So the idea of it being a C augmented major 7 with a G sharp in the bass is the most theoretically correct. So to play this chord, we're using our middle finger to play the 6th fret on the D string. We're barring the 5th fret on the G and B with the index finger. And then you can use your own interpretation of this next note. I play it with my little finger, but you can play it with your 3rd finger if you want. You're playing the 7th fret on the high E. So why does this fit the bill of being a C augmented major 7 with a G sharp in the bass? So first of all, we do have the G sharp in the bass. Now the G sharp is the sharp 5th note from C major. So that would be that. So that would be our augmented note. We're starting with the augmented note. The next note then would be our root. And then the note after that is the E, which is our major 3rd. So there's our augmented triad. Then there's this final note, the B, that note would be in the C major 7 chord. It's the major 7 note. So we're playing the augmented sharp 5 in the root itself, the major 3rd, and then the major 7. Now, as I said, there are a bunch of different theories and reasons why that chord is or isn't called that. So like I said, I've listed a few of those in the article down below, and you can see some of the other ideas. That is the most literal translation because all of the notes fit the chord name. There are some other theories about notes being left over, passing notes, a bunch of other things. So if you want to see some of those, you can hit that link. But we will, for the purpose of this, refer to that as being a C augmented major 7 with a G sharp in the bass. Now the next chord is a chord that you can move all over the guitar, and it's been used for many riffs by this guitar player. And that guitar player is Andy Summers of The Police. Now this chord is the chord that has kind of defined the sound of The Police, but also some of their classic songs. And this is an add 9 chord. So we most famously know this from songs like Message in a Bottle. This is a pretty tricky chord to play. So we're going to start with the first chord from that riff, which is a C sharp add 9. So I'm playing the C sharp note here on the A string, which is the 4th fret. That's my root. Then I'm playing the 5th interval, which is the 6th fret of the D string. So that gives me my C sharp 5 chord, my power chord. But then, this is where the tricky bit is, we're stretching up to the add 9 note, which is the 8th fret on the D. So I'm playing 3 notes there, 4, 6, and 8 across 3 adjacent strings. Now because of the nature of this chord, we can transpose this anywhere. So that riff actually goes from C sharp to A to B to F sharp. So you actually have an add 9 in all of those positions. That chord really helped define the sound of The Police and Andy Summers. It's used all over their big hits. Message in a Bottle is probably the most famous use of that, but you can also hear it in songs like Every Breath You Take. You can see he's doing a slight variation of it there, but really the bones of it is the same. We've still got that add 9 in the bass, which is adding this major 3rd at the top. But the idea is still centered around that add 9 chord. So that's a great chord to use if you want to add some Police style flavor to your riffs. The great thing with that is you can move that chord shape around too. So we learned that as a C sharp add 9, but like I said, you can take that to the 7th fret and you have an E add 9. Or drop it to the low E string and you have an A add 9 rooted from the 5th fret. Or a B add 9. It's a transposable shape that you can shift around and instantly add some of that Andy Summers vibe to your own chord patterns. The 8th chord that we're going to learn is from the track Lenny by Stevie Ray Vaughan. Now the chord in question is one that comes up on every repeat of the main riff. This chord is a G sharp sus4 with an E in the bass, and the chord sounds like this. Now this chord has quite a tricky stretch there, so if we break this down into the G sharp sus4 first of all, we're playing the G sharp note, which is the 6th fret of the D string with our index finger, the 5th of that chord, which is the 8th fret of the G with our 3rd finger, then we're barring the 9th fret on the B and E strings. So that's going to be our octave and then our sus4 note at the top. Then we're using our middle finger to reach over and add this 7th fret on the A. That's our E that we're putting in the bass there. So this is quite a tricky stretch, so you may have to move your hand around a little bit to find the right angle to attack those notes from, because this finger has to reach over the D string so you don't get this happening as it rests on that string. So you want to clear that string. And then we're also adding a double of the E note as an open low E string. So that's quite a tricky one to play because the stretch is quite difficult on that. So like I said, you've got to get that middle finger over the D string with enough clearance. And when you're doing a chord shape like this, your thumb position and your hand position is very, very important in getting the stretch right and in also getting the string clearance. So if you play with your thumb over the top of the neck, you may feel that this is quite a hard thing to do because obviously your fingers are going to be bunched together. So to really get the additional dexterity in your hand and the stretch for this chord, you want to drop your thumb and your wrist down. So you're kind of pushing your wrist down towards the floor and your thumb is moving down the back of the neck. That allows your hand to spread out, and then you can get that little bit of extra movement in that middle finger to get over the D string that you need. You don't want to push your hand too far around because you're going to bring this finger here that's barring 2 frets away from the neck. So it's finding a happy medium between being able to keep your little finger flat but get this finger over that D string so it's not resting on the string. It's quite a tricky one, so take your time with that one. And the final chord we're going to learn is from the Prince track Purple Rain, and this is a D sharp add 9. This is the chord that actually rounds out the initial chord progression you hear at the start of the song. So the initial chord progression is a B flat sus2, then a G gets added to the bass, then it goes to F, then it goes to D sharp add 9. Now this chord is a big stretch. So what we're doing here is we're playing a D sharp 7 chord like so. That's your regular D sharp dominant 7. But what you want to do is, instead of playing it with your third finger and your little finger like you normally would, you want to play it with your middle finger and third finger. So this now becomes your D sharp dominant 7 chord. That's the first step in learning how to play this chord, is getting your D sharp 7 like that. That frees up the little finger to add the 9, which is the 10th fret on the G. Now the trick here is to get that finger over the other strings. Much like the previous chord from Lenny, we have to adjust our hand position so that our little finger isn't doing this and resting on those other strings. We want each of those notes to be clear. So with that one, you do also have to play around with your hand position and find that perfect balance between the chords sounding right, but also the comfort of your hand. You don't want to push your hand down too far and lose the bar that you're doing, but you don't want your thumb to be too high and prevent you from actually being able to do the stretch clearly. So that is a tricky chord, but it's a really nice sounding chord. So that chord, if you were going to use that in your own playing, would fit really nicely into any clean chord progression. So if you're playing something with a dominant 7 chord or a major chord, you could use that add 9 substitution to add a little bit of ethereal shimmeriness to your progression. But also with that add 9, it kind of gives a little tip of the hat to Andy Summers from the Police as well. So you get the best of both worlds there. It's like a Prince and Police crossover chord. It's a great sounding chord and it's a lot of fun to use. So there you go. There are 9 iconic chords you can learn, take away and put into your own playing right away. Like I said, some of these chords will give you a challenge. Take your time with them. Work on your stretches, make sure your hands are in the right position and make sure all those notes are clean. And as always, don't put too much stress on your hands when you're practicing. They will feel hard at first and they will put strain on your hands. So if you're playing them to the point where they're hurting, take a step back and then come back to it at a later date. Build it up slowly until you can play them comfortably and pain-free. You can check out all of the chords and some information about them in the link down below. It takes you over to the Music Radar website. Go and hit that link, go and read the associated article and check out everything we've talked about today in full. If you have any iconic chords that you love and I haven't talked about in this video, please throw those down below in the comments as well. I'd love to hear what other iconic chords people think are worth learning on the guitar. While you're down there letting me know what chords I've missed from this lesson, don't forget to hit the like and the subscribe button, and I'll see you guys very soon. Thank you so much for watching, as always.